Week 3, the Bills and Dolphins open it up Thursday night at Highmark Stadium, Amazon Prime. And with us now, it's always a great honor and pleasure to welcome Al Michaels, who will have the play-by-play Thursday night. With us now, Mike Schopp and The Bulldog here on the West Her Hotline. Al, it's great to talk to you again. How's life?
Life is great, Mike, and looking forward to coming on in. And looks like the weather on Thursday night is going to be perfect. I can tell the long-term forecast anyway. So,
well, yeah, we are in a stretch here, Al.
Yes. I was wondering how likely it would be that you would check on the weather. I guess you have to pack. You know, it's a quick trip, but you know, you might want to always know. Do you do that on a regular basis? Like, is it going to be nice where I'm going?
Well, it's September, so you can kind of count on it being pretty good. I mean, we had Green Bay last week. It was, I said on the air, I don't think I've ever said a perfect night for football in Green Bay, because I've done a lot of November, December, and January games there under the lights. But that's as good as it gets. 66 degrees. Looks like it might be a little warmer in Buffalo come Thursday, but I'm taking it, man. I'm taking it.
Get your bad weather cities out of the way early on the Amazon Prime schedule, Green Bay and now Buffalo. Al, do you still love it? You broadcast your first game in 1973. It's so cool to hear you every week. Do you still love it?
I do. Actually, I go back to my first game was in 1971, believe it or not. So I'm doing the Cincinnati Reds as my primary job. And NBC in those years had coverage of the World Series and the baseball playoffs exclusively. So what would happen is, for a couple of weekends during October, Kurt Gowdy would go over to do baseball, and then Jim Simpson, who was the number 2 guy, he would go over to do like the other championship series. So that meant they took somebody, I think it was Jay Randolph, from the number 3 game to the 1 game. So they brought me in to do the last game, the very last game, on the docket that week, which happened to be, ready for this, 1971. You can look it up. October, I think, 3rd, Buffalo at Minnesota. Now, in those years, there was a blackout for the home market. So we weren't on in Minneapolis. And for the road market, Buffalo, the NBC station opted to do the baseball coverage. Well, I can't remember who was playing. I think Pittsburgh was playing in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So I got to do Buffalo at Minnesota. It was Bud Grant against, I think, Joe Collier, if I remember correctly. And in that game, in my very first game, I had O.J. Simpson and Al Cowlings in the game.
Yes.
Go figure.
But who was watching?
Yeah, if Buffalo didn't have it, what other market was
or
this?
Minnesota?
Yeah, right.
No, but they put it on a UHF station in Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
So if you wanted to, if you were in Buffalo and wanted to watch the game, you had to go to your rabbit ears and tinfoil and connect it and put it in a position where you could get a signal in those years, and that's how they got the game. And my partner was Johnny Morris, who to this day still holds a number of receiving records for the Chicago Bears. That's how bad the Bears have been offensively and through the years, that Johnny Morris is still dotting the record book.
I think he might be their all-time leading receiver. I think he might actually be their all-time leader in receiving yards.
He could. Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, so this was during the playoffs. Then in the World Series, they did the same thing. Gowdy's doing the series. They made Simpson the radio announcer on the NBC networks. So I do it again, and what's my game? Buffalo at the Jets at Shea Stadium. Blacked out in New York. Same thing in Buffalo. I was the king of UHF in Buffalo in those years.
Wow. It's not often you get people wishing they were just a couple of years older, because my point of entry for the Bills is 73. If not from me being 60, and if I were 62 years old, I might remember these games and trying to find the game on the UHF channel, Al.
Yeah.
Well, it's much easier to remember stuff from a million years ago than it is last week, I got to tell you at this point.
I agree. Well, at the risk of trying too hard here, this game you mentioned in Minnesota, the Vikings were 15-point favorites and won 19-0. You might have needed all your material for that one. And here we go, Al. This Bills team is rolling, and Miami is not. And we're talking about another game where the spread is a couple of touchdowns. Can Miami make it interesting? Are you going to need to tell stories on Thursday night? What are we looking at?
Well, it's the National Football League, guys. So I mean, anything can happen. I mean, you can't predict what's going to happen. Obviously, Buffalo is the better team. Buffalo should win. Buffalo's a big favorite. But I've been around long enough. One of the reasons, look, we love football, we love sports, because you don't know what's going to happen. And the unexpected happens with some frequency. So I'm saying right now, you look at the game and you go, well, there's no chance. But there is a chance. I mean, there's always a chance. Crazy stuff happens. Look, Miami had their heads handed to them against Indianapolis. They were horrible. Played better last week, though they did self-destruct once again toward the end of the game with false starts and penalties and and a bad operation offensively. But I just don't say in any event, in any game, even if the spread is whatever the hell it's going to be. And I think you guys said it's a 2-touchdown thing coming up on Thursday night. We love sports because we just don't know what's going to happen.
Right. See week 1 here at the stadium you'll be calling this game from, Al, with the Bills trailing by 15 as late as they were, and Josh Allen throws for 251 yards in the fourth quarter, and, is there no end to his superhero status? I mean, that's about as remarkable and, you didn't see it coming as it gets.
No, not at all. I mean, the game is over, and I guess some of the fans are leaving. It's late, so... some are probably trying to get back into the building at the end, but that's why, again, I go back to why we love it, because we don't know what's going to happen.
We have 2 buildings now. I'm not sure if you'll get a tour or anything like that if it interests you, but there is a fancy, sparkling new stadium right across the street. I will say, and I think Bulldog would concur, we're both lifelong residents of the area. It's surreal. Like driving down the 219 to go to games, and I went to my first game in '79. You'd first sort of see the stadium only by seeing the lights way off past the trees. You couldn't ever really see the stadium, which is down into the ground. Now you take that same little jerk of the head to the right, and there is the new Highmark Stadium right past those lights. It's just kind of incredible to think that that's happening here.
Well, it's amazing. I don't know that I'll get a chance to tour it, but on Hard Knocks, I know that there was a tour that Josh was on, and Terry Pagula and a few other people, and it looks great. The new stadiums now, they have the benefit of not making the mistakes that were made along the way. They've figured it out for the most part. How to build unbelievable stadiums. SoFi in Los Angeles, my hometown, is unbelievable. Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas is terrific. They're building a new one in Nashville. So everybody has learned from what's taken place in the past and have been able to study, any of the imperfections or problems that they've had. So I expect the stadium in Buffalo to be, state of the art.
Do you find this generation of stadium builds to be distinctive? We went through like mid-90s or so in hockey and basketball, but hockey as it pertains to Buffalo here, like a generation of buildings being built, and we lost a lot with the old buildings, the Aud here, the Boston Garden, Chicago Stadium. If you watch enough of a certain sport like hockey, you could tell where a game is being played without even seeing the logo on the ice, and now that's really hard. Do you find the football stadiums manage to avoid that?
Well, they have to a degree. So there are things that, when it comes to nostalgia, we want to remember as kids or where we were at certain points. And, I grew up in Brooklyn, Ebbets Field. Does anything resemble Ebbets Field right now? No. But that's my childhood. But so whatever you're missing in one regard, I think you're gaining in the other, because these stadiums are now, they're tremendous. And maybe they're too cool in a way. And a lot of them have to do with luxury suites and loge seats and PSLs and all of that, and great food. And the weird thing these days is that a lot of people who buy these boxes, they're at the game, but they're not watching the game. You look into some of these luxury boxes, and there's like 6 people in the back by the by the refrigerator in the bar, watching the game on television. But I guess people, they want to be there. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you're going to see too much of that in Buffalo. We see a whole bunch of that in Los Angeles. There's no question about it. Because a lot of people go, it's the place to be. But the place to be is sometimes where you don't want to be, but so you make the most of it by chatting up with your friends. I mean, to me, it's sort of a lot like what Super Bowl parties must be like when you get 50 or 60 people watching, you probably have like 20 people watching the game and 20 kind of looking at it a little bit, and then 20 more sitting out in the backyard, and drinking beer. So that's where we are these days, guys.
Right.
A little different from your earlier days in broadcasting when, you probably have so many stories, whether this goes back to Hawaii or just even in the early 70s in the majors, just in situations where, you might have had to sit in the crowd with a mic and sort of like figure out how to do the equipment to be able to get on the air. It was probably like that in the early days.
Well, in Hawaii, the key thing was termites had eaten most of the stadium, so we just wanted to make sure it would stand up through the course of the season, which it did. And then when I went to Cincinnati to do the Reds in 1971, that was at a time when they were building very similar stadiums in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Atlanta, and what they were soup tureens because they were round and they were made for both football and baseball. So it wasn't perfect for either sport. You had a round stadium for football and baseball. You had to make sure that a football configuration could be put in there as well. So it's funny, as I say, between Veterans Stadium, Riverfront, Three Rivers, Busch in St. Louis, and Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, they were all kind of state-of-the-art at that point, and they all lasted about 20 years. Because that's, or maybe 30 years, I guess, because between 1970 and, let's say, 2000. Then they started to build, the stadiums that I love. The one in Cleveland is great. Baltimore may have been the forerunner, with the warehouse behind the right field fence. San Diego looks fantastic. And I love when you're able to sit at a baseball game and look at the skyline. There's nothing like that for me.
Al, before you go, one of your previous visits with us, we talked about Ken Dryden. And, of course, you and he together at Lake Placid in 1980 is unforgettable. Yeah. We lost Dryden a couple of weeks ago, I guess. I don't know if you were still close to him, but he was really a great, not just, as a player, but in what he did for hockey and around hockey after his playing days.
I'll tell you, Mike, that was like a dagger. I felt like I got hit by a sledgehammer that day. When I read that, I didn't know Kenny was sick. Yeah, Kenny and I stayed in touch for all of these years. We talk maybe 3 times a year. We might see each other once every 3 or 4 years at a certain event. I loved him. He was so special, and of course I share the ultimate moment of my career, the pinnacle of my career in terms of a game to broadcast. I'll always share that with Ken. Ken was a private man. I didn't know he was sick, and I don't know anybody who I know who knew Ken who knew he was sick until the end. But they, you talk about a Renaissance man, and we like to use that term loosely. And sometimes, if a guy read 3 books in his life, we call him a Renaissance man. Kenny was the real Renaissance man. Don't forget, this is a man who had a fantastic career, 6 Stanley Cups, 5 Vezina trophies, retired at the apex of his career because he had so much more in life that he wanted to do. And the first thing, he got into broadcasting. We wind up doing the Olympics. Kenny passed the bar exam in the middle of the Olympics between the Romania game on a Wednesday night and the Soviet game on Friday, got driven to Ottawa, passed the bar exam.
Wow.
And then he went on to, then after Lake Placid, he moved the family. He wanted the family to experience living in a different country. They moved to London. He was studying at Cambridge at that particular point. He would eventually go on to become a parliamentarian. He ran for and won a seat in Parliament. People thought, and I thought so too, without question, Kenny could have been the Prime Minister of Canada. Obviously, you got the English-speaking most of Canada, but the French-speaking Quebec. But he was loved. He was loved on both sides of it as a Montreal Canadian, superstar, and as just a man who clearly would have been, I think, one of the great politicians in history. But Kenny became disenfranchised with politics, so he backed out of that. Became the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He wrote 6 or 7 books, including a book called The Game, about first person, the goalie, as the Montreal Canadiens, and what it's like to stand there on the ice. The knob on the stick, of course, is that one shot we'll never forget. Yeah. So I got to tell you, of all the partners I've had, and I've had some fabulous ones, obviously, through the years, Kenny was distinct. Kenny was different. Kenny, I love Kenny, and I could only liken him to one other guy who I work with, and that would be Arthur Ashe, who died too young, obviously. But I did some tennis on ABC back in the '80s with Arthur. They were two guys who were just separate. They were different. They were unique, and obviously I've missed Arthur for a long time, and Kenny right now it still chokes me up a little bit when I think that he passed last week.
I feel like it's a wonderful comparison, those two, it would seem. Mm-hmm. Who wins the Conn Smythe Trophy before they win the Calder? But Dryden pulled that off.
Right.
I know people forget about that, sure.
Thanks very much for your time today, as always, and enjoy your trip up. Have a safe trip.
Okay, guys. See you on Thursday. Take care, man.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Al Michaels on the Wester Hotline.